Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. I want to make sure this thing is working. Welcome to the Charter Commissioner Candidate Night hosted by the Detroit People's Platform. I'm Nicole Small. I will be your moderator for this evening. So if you'd like to get your beverages and some food, we're going to get ready to get started with the activities. I'm also a part of People's Platform and the president of the Millennium Business Community Association on Detroit Seaside. As you know, in August of this year, August 7th, primary, Detroiters voted by a narrow margin, less than 200 votes, to establish a city charter revision commission to conduct the revision process for the current city charter, which was implemented in 2012. Many residents questioned the wisdom of putting the question on the ballot, since many believe that the 2012 charter implementation had been uninterrupted with the state consent agreement, emergency management, and municipal bankruptcy. However, placing the question on the ballot was required by law, so there was no choice in this matter. The charter is very important as a document for Detroiters. The charter can be compared to the Constitution of the state of Michigan for the United States. The charter is the document that governs how we do business as a city here in Detroit and spells out the various roles, responsibilities, and requirements across all city government entities. The last charter revision took place over a 2-year period and cost the taxpayers roughly $1 million. That brings us to tonight. Tonight we will hear from several candidates who are running for the privilege of serving as charter commissioner and will appear on the November 7th ballot. All candidates received an invitation to the forum tonight. Here's how the process is going to run. We're going to start off by asking each candidate to give a 2-minute introduction and statement. And each candidate was given a sheet prior to us starting, so they had time to think about what they want to write and what they want to say about themselves. Following that response, I will ask a set of questions, 3 questions, which each candidate will have an opportunity to answer, and you will be given 2 minutes to respond to that. Next, we will welcome questions from the audience, and there are people with cards who will hand those cards out to you, and they'll hand those back to the person who passed them out. They'll sort them by category, and then we'll start to ask those questions of the candidate. Yes. If time permits, afterwards, we'll allow each candidate 1 minute to sort of wrap up why they are running for office and anything else they didn't think they got a chance to say. Any questions from the audience? Yes.
Yes. When they come up and they not only introduce themselves, announce their name and spell it for me.
What now?
Announce their name and spell it.
Okay, I'm gonna ask each one of you when you introduce yourself to spell your name for him. Okay. And everyone had a sheet prior to us starting that asked you to answer the 3 questions. Did everyone fill that out and turn it back in? Great. So we asked the candidates, if you have material to distribute, don't distribute that in the room. We're a nonprofit and we can't endorse any particular candidate, so you have to pass that actually outside of here. Thank you. So let's get started. This is a live streaming event, so this is being streamed on Facebook Live. So everything you say, there are lots of people watching us, and we'll see what you say and how you respond to questions. Let's go with the first question. And we have you introduce yourself, and we'll start here and go across the table. You have 2 minutes.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Denzel McCampbell, and that's DENZEL MC capital C AMPBELL. I've lived in Detroit for my whole life, except for the time that I was away at Michigan State University. I'm 26 years old. I currently live in District 7 under Councilman Gabe Leland. I've lived in District 7 for the last, since 2015. Before that, I lived in District 3. And I'm currently employed by Engage Michigan, which is a nonprofit communication hub for social justice groups across the city of Detroit and across the state of Michigan. I also do public policy work for a group called Black Youth Project 100. We're a volunteer group, but also have staff members. We're a group of Black young activists fighting for the liberation of all Black people, particularly around getting resources to our neighborhoods and pushing back on the mass incarceration system. Before I was a precinct delegate over in 349, and also I'm active with BYP 100 as a volunteer outside of my staff role, and Good Jobs Now. And the three values that I want to bring in, I'll talk more about it as we go on through the night for the Charter Commissioner: accessibility, accountability, and transparency. So I look forward to having a conversation with you all, and thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nicole Small, and that's NICOLESMALL. I've lived in Detroit for 38 years. District 2, City Council person is Roy McAllister. My employer is One Fair Wage. And I'm currently a precinct delegate of precinct 233. Two organizations that I work with is VOW, Voices of Women to Win, and also National Action Network. Three values that I believe are very important to the role as Charter Commission is definitely accessibility, building equitable policies, and transparency.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Karissa Holmes. That's KARISSAHOLMES. I have lived in Detroit since 2005, and I currently live in District 5. My neighborhood actually is District 5 and 6, so I interface with Mary Sheffield and Raquel Castanelo-Lopez. I am an attorney for Rock Ventures, and I was previously elected to serve on the Brush Park Citizens District Council before the emergency manager kind of nullified that organization. I'm still involved in that organization. We regrouped as the Brush Park Community Development Corporation. So I serve as a board member and the secretary of that group. I also was appointed to sit on the Neighborhood Advisory Committee for the District Detroit, which is the Little Caesars Arena and the related developments, to provide community feedback on that project to the developers and to the city. And three values that I think are really important to being a commissioner is one, being inclusive, listening to multiple perspectives, making the process accessible so that everyone has an opportunity to participate, and also just keeping an open mind and being able to see things from different viewpoints is going to be necessary as we determine whether changes are necessary for the charter.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tracy.
We'll try again. Good evening. My name is Tracy Peters. That's Tracy Peters. I have lived in Detroit 37 of my 51 years. Just had a birthday. I live currently in City Council District 4 with Councilman Spivey as our representative, but most of my life has been spent on the other side of Gratiot near City Airport. I'm a resident of the Pulaski neighborhood, as is my family. We've been in that house since it was built. So I would say District 3, 9th Precinct, 5th Precinct. I am self-employed as an attorney, but a bigger part of my professional career is as a public school teacher. I started in the Detroit Public Schools, where I also went to school. Proudly have taught in New York City, Chicago public schools for the sole purpose of trying to get it right. And what that means is working with your state government to get them to see the perspective of a large urban district. I also taught last in Southfield Public Schools. I've been practicing 6 years as an attorney, and I did work for a firm for a tiny bit representing school districts, thinking that was the right fit, but it's not. I'm a lawyer who represents education and public education. And you know what? I make that up every day as I go along because it's a fight. The two groups I'm a proud member of in Detroit are Keep the Vote, No Takeover. That is what I am most involved in. And my second group, again, is an extension of teaching. When our schools became fragmented, I started reaching out to different elementary schools and joining their PTAs, and I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Cindy Darrah, and I'm a write-in. So here's the way you can remember. Just think of Sin, S-I-N, but it's Cindy, C-I-N-D-Y. And then Darrah, dare to go raw. I did swim across the river and my bumper stickers came off back in '77 to get free publicity to run for the council. But, so D-A-R-R-A-H. That's when you can remember to write it in. And we're gonna try and print up a little business card, but if you can remember that, pass it on. And I've got a friend, Joanna Underwood. She's also a write-in candidate. She's a lawyer, lives in the North End, and she's going to 3 different community meetings. She's really involved in her neighborhood, and you can't hardly draw her out of it. If we get her on the board, it's going to be hard to make her go to the meetings. She'll be going to the neighborhood meetings, but we'll have to get them scheduled differently. So, but she's an attorney, and she grew up.
Cindy, did you get this sheet that
well,
says
I
what you're
copied it up.
supposed to answer?
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
all right, let's
anyway,
get to that.
I came here in 1967, and my parents saw 12th Street burning on TV and said, can't you call those other 2 schools up that let you into graduate school for social studies? I said, no, because I want to go to a big city, and I want to change the system. I don't want to give therapy to people to adjust to a sick system. So I want to go social psychology at Wayne, not clinical at U of D, Louisville and Southern Illinois. And, so anyway, so that's I've been here, and I was on the University City Aid Citizens District Council and the Model Neighborhood Citizens Governing Board years ago. I'm currently a precinct delegate, but I haven't really done anything on that. I've got to start going back to the 13th district meetings, I guess. So, but I go to the water meetings like yesterday.
Sorry, Cindy.
Thank you very much,
Time.
Cindy. We're going to move on. Thank you. So, remind the candidates we have 2 minutes to respond to each question. So the first question is, some of you have answered a bit in your introduction, but we want to allow you time to spend just 2 minutes on this particular topic, and that was, what are your top 3 values that you believe are important to anyone who serves as a city charter revision commission member?
So, as I stated, the 3 values for me are accessibility, accountability, and transparency. So, we have to make sure that folks know what's in the charter, the current charter right now. And one thing, if I'm elected to be on the commission, is to actually have meetings in the community to go through what is in the charter right now, and then to hear input from community members about what things should change, what things should stay, and have that dialogue. Also thinking about having those meetings in, like I said, in neighborhoods, in places that folks are, making sure that we don't have it downtown, a place that's inaccessible for folks with parking and getting down there, and also a place that is accessible via bus routes as well. Then accountability. We have to have accountability for commissioners and also accountability within the charter. We have to make sure that we have the teeth in the charter that holds elected officials accountable, but also the folks who are working in these departments in the city. Right now we have an ethics clause in the charter, but we have to make sure that it's stronger and make sure that citizens know that they can take action and that they can go to the ethics board and make sure that action is taken on their behalf. And then transparency. These meetings will be open, and they have to, like I said, they have to be in neighborhoods. We have to have a commission that is transparent in their thinking, transparent in decisions that they are making, and transparent in making sure that they are taking in the concerns of residents and making decisions on what they hear from those folks as well. We also have to make sure that the charter reflects a transparent government. There are a lot of decisions backroom deals that have been made, especially around development, and we have to make sure that we are enforcing things that ensure that transparency is happening, no matter the development deals, no matter if there's changing policies with departments, and no matter if there are votes to be taken at City Council.
Thank you, Denzel. Nicole.
Yeah. I think it's first and foremost important, not only as a candidate, but also also as a voter, that we do our due diligence and ensure that we take a look at each and every candidate on the ballot, and we make sure that we're voting for candidates who want to secure the interests of the people with our local government and not the outside interests of corporate welfare. Secondly, when we talk about transparency, I think it's very transparent right now what's going on in local government. They are definitely there to advocate for multimillionaires and billionaires. They're overlooking and undervaluing the voice of the people and the needs of the people. We definitely need to work on that. And when we talk about educating our community about what the charter is in order for them to understand what changes they would like to see and other things that they would like to preserve, that's a different conversation. We need to ensure that we don't just let them know a week ahead of time that the meeting is coming in their community. We should be open and transparent and let them know and welcome them and work with the community leaders in each district to make sure that they have an opportunity to mobilize as many people in their community to come to these meetings to ensure that they have a voice. And last but not least, we need to take a look at ensuring that we have a local government that represents us when it comes to the budget, when it comes to bidding contracts, when it comes to development and assets that are giving away.
Nicole. Thank you.
So the first value that I spoke about was being inclusive, and again, I believe it's necessary for us to go out into each of the neighborhoods, establish relationships with the grassroots organizations in the district to understand the issues that have been affecting their neighborhoods, so that we even have an idea as a Charter Revision Commission, what are the issues that are affecting Detroiters right now. And then we need to be accessible. We need to make it easy for people to, one, understand what is in the charter and understand how to get feedback to the commissioner so that we can consider their input. The last time that the charter was revised, there were a lot of community meetings, but it's difficult to get to meetings. Like, I work full time. It's difficult to get to a 6 o'clock or a 5:30 meeting. We need to use 2018 technology to allow people to participate. We need to use text messaging to let people know what's happening, how they can get involved. We can do polls electronically. We can do surveys. We can do online forums. Like, we're live streaming this tonight so that people can view this not just today, but tomorrow and through the election day. So we need to make sure that we're using all types of platforms in order to engage people. And lastly, I talked about listening. I am in a really unique position where I have worked for developers in the past, but I live in a neighborhood that is being ravaged by development. And Brush Park is a completely different neighborhood than what it was when I moved there in 2012. And there are positive changes to development, but there are really frustrating things that are happening that are just making it difficult to be a resident there. So I want to make sure that we are creating a Detroit where we can invite new, exciting things in, but also that we're not forgetting to take care of the residents who pay taxes and who also need to have a voice and be protected.
Thank you, Carissa. Tracy.
The first value I think is important to each of us, should we be elected, is to be an engaging commissioner. And what that means is that in a city, at least in my council district, where I'm told that there is a 17% voter turnout rate, it is incumbent upon me as an elected official to do something about that. I must engage fellow Detroiters and ask, how can you be part of the process? That can be in person, that could be via technology, but number one is engaging. Number two, every charter commissioner should be accountable. And I guess maybe because I was a teacher, I break that down to the various simplest levels of answering phone calls and saying I'm wrong when I'm wrong. And that goes among our 9-member commission or at a community convention, but that's accountability to me. And the last value is to be determined. At this point in time, I think any elected official representing you all or the city of Detroit that is in a relationship with the state of Michigan has to be so determined to fight for every dollar. More recently, as it related to agreements where we could not see tax abatements that were available to an Amazon deal that was pending. That's one example, but I guess I also mean that the state sees our city government, this is how I perceive it, as in entering so many agreements with nonprofits and foundations. And that makes the state feel happy because the state is not owing us our revenue sharing. So you have to be determined. You have to fight for every single thing because this position will be an uphill battle.
Thank you, Tracy. Cindy.
Well, I think, to me, integrity is the most important thing. It's hard to figure out unless you've dealt with people on an individual level. But anyway, to me, that's the most important thing. Integrity, honesty, humility, being creative. Now, what I would like to think is that you take this specific situation, like the times that the city has kind of mistreated me, and you also hear how they mistreat other people, and you get into the specifics, then figure out what we can do in a charter to change so we got a better outcome. And I think that that's a good approach. And here's an example. When you go to get a copy of your FOIA, you got to bring them the number of the FOIA. They don't have it listed under your name, although it wouldn't be that hard to list it under your name, so you just tell them which ones you want. But when you go to the city council, if you testify at public comment, it will only be video recorded, but they will not record you in the minutes unless, I asked Deontay today in the elevator, he records. He was taught 2 years ago to quit recording public comment. So, but if you send a letter into the council, then they will put it into the written minutes, and that's the only way. But see, and then if why do we have to FOIA everything? I mean, gosh, this is our government. It just seems ridiculous. But that's the challenge. If we're going to write a charter, and sometimes I think like this thing about having a Detroit election commission, that's still dependent on elections. They cost a lot of money. Maybe we're better off trying to randomly select people like they're doing in the House and I don't know.
Thank you, Cindy.
And then you don't have all
Chase,
that
the same
wasted
question.
time.
The question of your top 3 values that you believe are important for those who serve as a charter revision commission.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tracy Cantrell.
He needs to do an intro. Yeah, we don't know who he is. People don't know. He needs to do an
As you get intro,
All right, so good evening, everyone. My name is Chase.
It's a minute, he was late. A minute.
1 minute.
My name is Chase Cantrell. I'm a native Detroiter, executive director of Building Community Value, a nonprofit here in the city of Detroit, which empowers Detroiters to do real estate development in their own neighborhoods. Went to Renaissance High School, proud graduate of Detroit Public Schools. Went to the University of Michigan to study political science as well as law. I've practiced law for 7 years actively, but I've been a lawyer for 10 years. Part of the reason that I stopped practicing law is that I realized that the economic interests of the firm that I was working at didn't match my own personal values, so I decided to leave that firm to start a nonprofit and start working with the community more closely. So I'm running for the Charter Commission because I believe that this is the document from which all of our power emanates, and I think that we have to have people who are centered in community to be able to go to community, get your opinions, understand clearly what your priorities are for the charter to guide this process. So in terms of values, the first value that I think is most important is empathy. Earlier this year, I wrote an article in the Free Press that talked about something that really made me mad, actually. I used to hear our current administration talk about one Detroit, when we all know that we don't have a single city. We have multiple Detroits, in fact. There are people that are living in very different situations, depending on where you are and how much resources you have. I talked about the trauma that many of us as Detroiters have gone through and continue to go through in our neighborhoods, where water is shut off, where vacant parcels are left to just be dilapidated, where whole fabrics of communities are ripped away as buildings are being demolished all across our city. So just understanding where Detroiters are, I think is the most important thing for a charter commissioner, to actually want to talk to Detroiters, listen to Detroiters, understand what real Detroiters are going through before we even launch into what should be the charter itself. After that, I think forward thinking is really important. far too often we're reactive in government. We talk about things that we don't like from city council, from the mayor, but this is our chance. This is our chance to actually think about what we want Detroit to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. The next charter revision question won't come up for another 16 years. So by that point, you know, my nieces who are young will be adults, they'll be voters, they'll be working. And I want to leave a Detroit for them when they're adults that they can be proud of and that they can thrive in. So not being reactive, but being future thinking. And being focused, because all of us, I think some of us have already experienced this and we're going to continue to experience this. We're going to have to talk to city council members, we're going to talk to people in the administration, we're going to talk to community members, and there are going to be various interests that are going to try to sway us to take certain decisions. And we have to remember that we're here to represent you, the Detroiters, Detroit voters who live in our neighborhoods, not those who have deep pockets, but really those who make our city what it is and make it the great place that we all want to live in. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chase. The next candidate, you have 1 minute for your introduction and 2 minutes to answer the question.
Okay, I would really want to apologize for being late. I respect you guys' time, and I'm sorry for being late because I was knocking doors. My name is Joanna Underwood, and I'm a political activist, a community organizer in the great city of Detroit. I am a mother of an 8-year-old. Some of you guys might see my son. I am a director of Detroit Black Women's Council, and I am a strong advocate and fighter for the people and have been fighting on the ground, boots on the ground, for 3 years consistently working on every bad public policy that's coming out of the current mayor administration. I make it no secret that I oppose the policies of the mayor because it goes against the welfare and the livelihood of Detroiters from all different backgrounds and educational backgrounds. We all affected by this public policy in a negative way. Also, I am right now currently I'm working as an organizer for Your Future. Also, doing political analyst work for Hydrate Detroit. Okay.
Thank you very much.
She has to give her values.
So your second question is, what are the top 3 values that you believe are important to anyone who serves as a charter commission division?
Okay, I always run based upon transparency, accountability, and also proper representation from the neighborhood. My values is people first, collective economics, and a Detroiter that we can be a Detroit that benefits all the residents of the city of Detroit, and make sure that we all prosper.
We're tied, and accountability and integrity, we're tied. So, honesty, openness, transparency, accountability, and integrity is what you guys reported out on. Thank
you very much. So the next question, and we're going to start with Cindy. What aspects of the city charter do you want to protect? What aspects of the city charter do you want to protect? 2 minutes.
Actually, these are the 3 charters. This is what this looks like. $8 now. If you want the hard copy, it's nicer than the computer. But it's, city clerk has it, and maybe the election department. But these are the older ones, but I don't know if they have any more of them. But I like the preamble, and actually I think that they took that out of one of the earlier charters too, but I like that first page. But it's general. Now, we have to figure out how to make the specifics in these different areas. And yeah, so that part I like, but I think I would change that advisory commission. Let's try the random draw from each district and get advisory commissions going. And then we should go back, Gwen Mingo thinks we ought to go back to the Citizens District Council that was elected when they used CDC. You got to ask them, do you mean the Citizens District Council or do you mean the Community Development Corporation? That's appointed, not elected. But anyway, I think also when I was reading Article 12 a couple of years ago, I wanted to change a lot of that to make it easier for us to control the government.
because that's where they've got the initiatives and the referendums, and you can't do anything with the budget. But I think that is a state law, that thing where if anything has money on it, we can't touch it on a referendum. Or I'm not sure, but we did try to recall that $34.5 million. So, I'm not a real big fan of any of it. I think that the water, maybe we should
that are being put toward me for extra services in my community. I have a vote through city council, but I do not have a vote within the private body that administers the assessment. If we do not have a vote in direct expenditures of our tax dollars, that's a violation, in my opinion, of the one person, one vote principle. The charter is all about voting. Without one person, one vote, there is no charter. So I would really strive to protect that.
Thank you. Next, Carissa.
So I think generally I am in favor of protecting provisions that create transparency and accountability in the charter. Like Tracy, I would support the continuance of the Board of Police Commissioners. I believe that's important so that we have oversight there. I also would like to take a look at programs that are intended to make Detroit a healthier and a greener city. There are some provisions related to recycling and things of that matter, but I think that those are really important to be protected. To me, like, environmental matters are very important. They affect your health at a fundamental level, and sometimes those things are overlooked, so that's something that I would also like to focus on. I would also like to think about how we can address development in a sensible way in a charter, and that's something that I would like to protect for citizens.
Thank you. Nicole.
First and foremost, I would like to protect the greatest asset that we have in the city, which are the people of the city of Detroit. And I would like to do that by definitely protecting our Board of Police Commissioners. Right now, we elect 7, 1 for each district, and the mayor gets to appoint 4. I would like for the mayor to appoint 2, and I think that we should elect 1 for each district and 2 at large to ensure that each and every term we have a full body of police commissioners. Secondly, I would like to protect the pensioners. For some reason, we keep giving away a lot of our assets and land and get very little in return, but we can never find a way to make the pensioners whole. So I would like to take a look at a lot of these development deals and how they take place, and I think a certain percentage should go back to reimbursing the pensioners and making them whole as well.
Thank you. Denzel.
I'm sorry, and water rates. I would definitely like to protect water rates. We introduced a water affordability bill proposal in 2005. We need to figure out a way to implement that in our charter.
Thank you, Nicole. Denzel.
So as Cindy and Tracy mentioned the preamble, and in the preamble it talks about how the city must provide housing, it must provide education, it must provide clean air and water, and it must protect its waterways and assets as well. I want to preserve that, but also put teeth in the charter that actually do those things for folks, right?
Right.
Also, I am in agreement of protecting the Board of Police Commissioner and expanding it to be non-elected seats. The fact that we're hearing that folks want to get rid of that goes against where this country should be going when it comes to police accountability. And also keeping the ethics clause in the charter, as I mentioned, actually putting teeth to that so folks can hold city officials accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Denzel. Chase.
So for me, I think there are a lot of important provisions. I mean, we talk about the Board of Police Commissioners, we talk about the environment. For me, something that we've never mentioned in any forum that I've been present at is arts and culture in the city of Detroit. Detroit is a black city. And in the charter itself, you know, it requires a Department of Arts that our current administration has not implemented. If you look at other black cities, there are robust economies that are built around music and art and dance, all of the things that are coming from our neighborhoods, that come from our culture that we need to preserve within our rapidly evolving city. So for me, one of the most important things that I want to preserve and actually put teeth around is Denzel said, is that Department of Arts, making sure that as we're, again, envisioning what this future Detroit should look like, this paradox that exists for me where people come in because the city is a culturally vibrant city, it's a gritty city, people say, but then they come and act as though no one lives here. It's a paradox that I don't understand how that exists. So for me, it's protecting our arts, it's protecting our culture, and doing more than that, promoting it and making sure that we ourselves are actually thriving off of the art that we're creating.
Thank you. Joanna?
The main thing I want to protect is the 51% hiring rule to give that teeth and enforcement when it comes up to private development, looking at the tax incentives and abatements that they receive versus what the community receive. Also, these appointed boards that have so much power, and we have little influence over those appointed boards that's over some of these development projects. And so I would like to look into that. I don't want to protect that though. But the main thing that I want to protect is the 51% hiring rule for Detroiters on development projects. Also the police commissioners. And also I want to protect the CACs and make them better and more effective.
Thank you, Joanna. Now we'll hear how you voted in the room.
All right, so the top three provisions in the charter that you, as Detroiters in the room, wanted to see protected. Number one was residency for elected officials. Number two was ethical standards and rules that prohibit abuse and corruption among elected officials. And number three was the mandate, and it is a mandate, to report political contributions for all contractors in the city of Detroit. So a little bit of variance there.
Thank you very much. Now the last question that we have from people's platform, the rest of the questions will come from the audience. So have those cards been passed in and started to be collected yet? So what changes or additions do you want to see in the revision of the city charter? And we'll start with Joanna.
One of the changes I want to see is actually extending the residency requirement for elected officials from 1 year to 4 years. Because we don't have any transparency when it comes up to our elected office, because people just moving back into the city, they don't really get the chance to understand the culture of the city of Detroit before they run for office. And I think 4 years is enough time to establish yourself in the community and make sure that you're honest and that you have the best intentions for all Detroiters. So that's one of the main things that I want to change. Also, I want to look at the water commission and the rates. The water board, the water commissioners adjust the rates, and I don't know who supervised them. I know the city council approved the rates, but they adjust them 3 times in 1 year. And the water rates is going up ridiculously, the drainage fee. And so I want to look at the water commissioners, and do we want to keep that appointed body now that the city of Detroit leased out their water department to the Great Lakes Water Authority, which is basically corporate interests. The second thing, like I mentioned before, the community benefits, not the community benefit agreement, I want to look at that too, but the CACs, where we have community advisory council, but they don't have a real legal description on what they do and how to do it, and they're poorly ran and not set up properly. So those are the things that I really want to look at, that I really want to change and make our Constitution for the people, and make sure we're able to hold our elected official accountable with our Constitution. And so for so long we haven't been able to do that. And so we really need some real enforcement, some transparency, some accountability, and also we need people that's going to be aggressive in that process. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we'll have Chase.
So one of the things that I do fairly often is I try to get information from our city government. whether that be budgets, whether that be organizational charts, all kinds of information, to put that out to my network so that people know how our government is functioning. Recently, I was told that our organizational chart, the actual structure of our government, I'm not going to be able to get a chart. We're not going to be able to get a chart until January. I was told that for the budget for this charter commission, the last commission that we had, I'm not going to be able to get numbers without going through the media department rather than the budget department. So for me, one of the most important things is having a transparency protocol in the charter. There are various provisions where transparency is mentioned, the kind of dissemination of information from the government to us as citizens, but there's nothing clear in a separate section that talks about the various mechanisms for transparency, the time in which government has to actually give information to citizens, and the manner in which that information has to be given so that not only interested citizens can be able to go and get that information, but the watchdogs that we have in our communities can be able to get the information that they need to do the analysis, to get out to our community so that we actually understand what's happening in city government. So that's the main change that I want to make. Also, in terms of the community advisory councils, which simply aren't working. We only have one CAC. The thresholds are too difficult. We need to have a kind of protocol that is akin to the citizen districts that we used to have, where we can really have access to our government. We can really have a greater say. And that I wouldn't have that necessarily randomized, but having a very clear process so that members of each district have a say and have a clear path to our city council and to our city government for us to give our opinions.
Thank you, Chase. Now we have Denzel.
So I want to start off and say these are things that I want to change, but also this will come from a lot of input from community members. One thing that I talk about a lot is participatory budgeting, in a way that we can have, if there are things that folks want in their neighborhood, that they can come together as a neighborhood and say, here are the projects that we want, and that we can have city funding for those projects instead of relying on philanthropy or nonprofits to actually provide those things for our neighborhoods. We'll have a part of our budget that we're mandated that the city actually carry out these projects. Also, putting a community benefits language in, enforceable community benefits language within the charter. And also, as Nicole mentioned as well, the water affordability plan to actually make sure that the city is implementing that. Also, as Chase mentioned and Joanna mentioned it, bringing back the citizen district councils and making sure that residents have that check on city officials. And lastly, folks did bring this up for the residency requirement. I'm in agreement with Joanna's extending those residency requirements to 4 years, not allowing folks to get around that, whether it's a write-in campaign or not.
Thank you, Denzel. Now we have Nicole.
So I too agree definitely with extending the residency requirement. I would also like to change the process, the bidding, for bidding contracts for development. I think that there definitely needs to be more transparency, and I would like to see someone elected to that process from the people to ensure that the contractors who look like us and who actually live in the city, not someone who's just going to get a P.O. box for their business to say that they're a Detroit-based business, are getting all of these contracts. Also, we need to take a look at the process for the hiring requirements. You know, I highly doubt that out of all of these developments that have come into the city, we keep hearing that there are not enough Detroiters who are qualified. Well, if there's not enough Detroiters who are qualified, why do we keep having people graduating from trades, community colleges, and universities? It's the same thing that they're telling us about these jobs downtown in the mayoral administration and the rest of the appointed positions in the city of Detroit. We need some transparency and some accountability for both of those processes. Otherwise, we will continue to be locked out of a job that will stop us from getting our water shut off, stop us from having this predatory tax foreclosure, and stop us from always having to go downtown, fight, holler, beg, only to be overlooked and blocked out.
Thank you, Nicole. Next we have Carissa.
All right, so the part of the charter that I would most like to change is the CDC process. Like I said, I was elected to my CDC in Brush Park, and it was overturned because of the emergency manager. However, we had a strong organization, and we were able to regroup, and we were able to be recognized by the city government and to still participate in that role as we have so many developments in the neighborhood. However, one of the reasons why these organizations are so ineffective is because they're not funded. They're not funded by the city, they're not funded by the state, and how do you expect people to be effective if you don't give them any tools to be effective? So I would like to see some language to provide some funding and real structure for neighborhood organizations such as CDCs, such as NACs, so that they can actually accomplish the goals that they're setting out to accomplish.
Thank you, Carissa. Next we have Tracy.
The first change that I would make might address what Joanna and Nicole shared as a concern of numerous executive branch appointees. The mayor in our city, and I don't mean Mayor Duggan, I mean that branch of government, can appoint so many individuals that we do not have an effect on. And I thought of a provision in the charter that may affect that as it relates to the 4 appointees that the mayor gets on the Board of Police Commissioners, the Corporation Council, and also the police chief. Right now, the language says that they're automatically approved if city council doesn't within 30 days object. I mean, that's simplifying it, but that's it. But I'd like when it comes to those 3 jobs, I would like there to be an opportunity for discussion on that, most particularly with police commissioners, because I think when there's not a quorum in city council and they may want to speak up, that language precludes it because they don't have a quorum. Number 2, in the back of the charter, in the addenda, there's language about the mayor's role in the public schools in Detroit. And the language currently says, shall maintain and support. That is very, very liberal language. We have a city government right now that is moving to take over our schools in Detroit. And that's not their function, nor is the public school system the function to provide sewerage and fire. So I would strengthen that language. And last, back to voting rights. The language is weak. It says city government shall endeavor to follow the one person, one vote principle. Endeavor is aspirational. The fundamental right to vote is not aspirational. That's a fundamental right. I would strike that and make that language stronger.
Thank you, Tracy. And the last candidate to respond to our prepared question is Cindy.
Yeah, speaking of, this is Article 12, and she was reminding me, we tried to repeal that $34.5 million that went to the Pistons, so we only had I think 30 days from the date that they published it in their legal news. Well, so we got about 300 signatures the first 30 days when we put the thing on the back that we got out of legal news, but you couldn't even see where the $34.5 million was. But anyway, then we paid these people, and they helped us get $7,900 in 15 days, because that's what the charter says. But we shouldn't have to use paid people to do petitioning for democracy. It really should be a volunteer effort, if possible, where people believe in something and have to go out and do it. So we should look at extending these timelines so that you can have a chance to have, because we couldn't have done it. John and I are old. We couldn't get, we got 300 in probably 2 weeks. But okay, the other thing real quick, I would say that we should try and put in the charter that you have to elect the DWSD board with publicly financed elections, and we can do that with the Detroit Election Commission and the Charter Commission and the Police Commission have publicly financed elections. And then if we can also elect the 2 that represent us on the Great Lakes Water Authority. See, so we might as well do that too. And put that in the charter and put in that we're not going to tolerate shutoffs and let them deal with the problem. These bean counters that aren't scientists and don't know much about, water. So anyway, that's what I suggest, because right now they're appointed. And DTE gives people heat, so why can't we give them water, And it's really, they have a certain operating cost, regardless of how many people use it. They're trying to get the cost paid, that's all. And they want you to use a lot of water so they can make more money, instead of conserving. Okay, so we can...
Thank you very much, Cindy. We appreciate your candidates and your response to the question. Now, the next thing we'll hear is how the audience responds to the question, so you know how you fare with the audiences present today.
All right, in terms of the 3 changes that the audience wanted to see, in terms of chart of the top 3, embedding 51% job requirements for Detroiters, mandating stronger protections around community benefit agreements, and stronger human rights and enforcement of compliance by all contractors.
So the next group of questions are from the audience.
We have a lot of questions from you all.
So you may or may
There's
not
no
give your
way we're
question.
gonna get to all these questions, and some of them are really, really good, but they're really, really complicated. So you guys will have to forgive us if we make some selections up here. Don't nobody be mad at us if we can't get to all the questions, please. So let's do what we can. We have another 20 minutes.
Okay, so these questions do
Thanks
not
for the
require
quick
each of you to
participation.
answer. Those who like to answer can respond.
Yeah.
And so
Those who want to respond.
the first question is, have you read the charter to know what is currently a part of it? Do you know the history? Please use the mic.
Yes, I've read the charter to know what's a part of it. More importantly, I do know the history. I do know that Detroiters did not always have the right to ask you all and me to write our own charter. The legislature wrote it for us, I believe, until 1909. And that's why I'm so in favor of being strong against the state.
Oh, sorry.
Joanna.
Yeah, I don't know if this mic is working or not, but y'all hear me, right?
This one is working.
Okay. Yes, I have read the Detroit City Charter in 2012, but I also want to tell the public that we haven't fully utilized this charter. Our charter was opened up prematurely. Also, we had another opening in 2009, and so anytime it appears that anytime our local city government want to change something in our constitution, they prematurely open up our charter. So this time around, we want to make sure that we revise the charter in a way where they don't just open it up every time. I don't even think they should open it up in the next 16 years. It's just like the federal constitution. We don't always open that constitution and make amendments to it. So why should we do it on a local level? And so that's what I really want to inform the people, that this charter was forced to be open and I was opposed to it. But unfortunately we lost. But I just want you guys to know this.
Thank you. Cindy and then
Respond
Chase.
just 1 minute, you all, so we can get to as many of the audience questions as we
Then
can.
Cindy will be next and then Chase. Nicole,
Okay.
Cindy, then Chase.
So yes, I have read the charter. As far as the history, I do agree. I didn't vote to open the charter. The only reason why I'm standing here today is because I'm extremely frustrated and I'm just full of seeing all of these rapid changes going on in the city, and they exclude the people that have helped sustain the city. That's why I'm standing here today. The charter has always yielded its power to the mayor, and I say this all the time. What we need to understand is that there have been significant changes in the mayoral administration, and it has done a phenomenal job of excluding the interest of the people, which is why we should have stood to keep the charter closed with an opportunity to present council with some amendments that we would like to see. I am opposed to revising the entire charter, but I am in favor of amending the areas that are ambiguous and exclude us from having a voice when we're the taxpayers.
I just started, I have these transcripts I had for over a week, and I started reading them today, and now I've got to sit down and write some more before I resubmit it for the third time, because it's very possible that they cheated on this, because I got just the way the timing, I've been getting a lot of data here, and I'm going to get a little more. And maybe, but my feeling is that we need to have a year or two to talk about what kind of charter, what kind of city, what are our problems, and who can come up with, let's get together and try and brainstorm and figure out how to get out of this hole. So I don't like this rush to a charter, and then it's not.
Charter. There's a summary in October 2011, gives the history, gives a good breakdown of the charter. So just as a resource, if you're wondering what that last commission changed and what the history of the charter itself is in the city of Detroit, it's a great resource. Just want to put that out there.
Thank you. We're going to combine two questions. The first is, what would you add to the charter to increase accountability of city government towards the citizens? The second question, is related, is how will you ensure and protect accountability for housing development for low-income residents using the CBO or CBA process?
Housing, I've been fighting the foreclosure crisis in the city of Detroit. The city of Detroit do not have a foreclosure prevention program. They leave that up to the Wayne County Treasurer Office. So I will be in favor of the grace period. So a 90-day grace period between the city of Detroit and the Wayne County Treasurer Office. We really need that grace period.
Thank you, Joanna.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to respond to that question?
This is now, okay. So one part of that, like I mentioned before with the Ethics Commission, part of most folks don't purposely don't know who's on the Ethics Commission, right? But making sure that we have, because we have to face the reality of our city, and we can't just put projects for aspirational folks to come in, but we have to take
Thank you,
folks who
Denzel.
are here. Thank you.
I think to answer both questions, we could just sum it up. The first thing we need to do is to ensure that our vote counts. We are just throwing away too many ballots every election, and they're just going in the trash. If our vote doesn't count, that lessens our chances of getting elected officials with integrity and the ones who ensure that they're going to advocate and do the job based on the platform that
unaffordable for average residents. The way that's happening is that City Council is enacting ordinances basically to push long-term residents out. Now, I'm not saying that that's the intent, but what I'm saying is it's very hard to live affordably in the city of Detroit. And so in terms of designating through the CBA process, yes, but I also want to say that affordable housing should be looked at as to, are we just creating gated communities and then a section over here for affordable folks or poor people? No, it's just going the wrong direction.
So I'll answer this one first because I'll be really transparent. I work for Rock Ventures. Everybody knows who Rock Ventures is. But I also live in a neighborhood. Okay, I'm sorry. So Rock Ventures is affiliated with Dan Gilbert. Okay. So, but I also live in a neighborhood that has gone unprecedented transformation over the last 6 years. And I moved to Brush Park. I bought a property there before they even announced the new stadium, before they were even talking about building things in the neighborhood. So, although I work for someone who is, benefiting from this development, I live in a neighborhood and I'm affected on a daily basis by these policies that are put into place. And I can tell you, like, my lifestyle and the ability just to enjoy living in my neighborhood has been drastically changed by the new development. So I don't think that it will be a difficult thing at all for me to balance my interests. One, that's my job. That's how I make money. This charter, this affects how I live and how, the children that I plan to have who will live in the city will live. So
Thank you very much. Nicole and then Cindy.
Oh, wait.
Nicole and then Cindy.
Equalized value on the 8th floor. Then I went back to the first floor and had them print out how much taxes were paid each year. Well, then you find out that now that it's real, they got it to the Peterborough properties from Midtown, taking it off with first right of refusal, and Sue Malsey, I think, is a member of both organizations. It would seem like it's unethical, but I don't think we have any rules against that, but maybe we need them.
Sorry, Cindy.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Cindy.
We're done, Cindy. Thank you.
And The next question is, can the charter determine recall requirements? Can the charter determine recall requirements?
Yes, and, okay. Yes and no. From my understanding, the Governor Snyder had made it harder for us to do recall on a local level. We can still do a recall. We just have to wait a year. According to the state, they changed the process of how we turn in our petitions to do a recall. So we have to wait a year for the person that we want to recall. They have to serve a year before we can do the recall. And it was 90 days, I believe they reduced it down to 60 days for us to actually do a recall. And so depending on what district you living in, and depending on the city council percentage of the votes, like in my city council, District 7, he got 8,000, so it would take like 2,000 plus votes to recall him. So we can still do it, but it's a process that we got to go from the state. Okay.
Would anyone else like to respond to that question? If not, we'll move on. Okay. The next question, I'm going to ask two questions together. Yes. So the first question is, do you feel that the whole charter should be opened? Would amending the charter be more efficient? The second question is, what is your position on the suggestion made by Chase that the revised charter create a Department of Arts and Cultural Affairs?
Yes. Like I said, I was opposed to opening up the charter. That's what I would like to have done, is did amendments to the charter and keep the charter closed. It was unnecessary to open up our charter, because we could have did everything that we want to do through an amendment process, and that would be more effective. And now we open up our charter, it's like open up Pandora's box. And now we got to sit here and fight and make sure we protect the interests of the people. And what Chase said is very, it's something we can look at. I think it's a good idea. We should capitalize off the history of Motown, but it should be done in a way where it's beneficial to the community. And I think all the money that we generate from the arts should go to the community and the housing, helping people water, the retirees. Actually, that's a good way to generate money for the retirees, because we need to do something about that pension debt. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I agree. I voted no on reopening the charter as well. Definitely should have went through more of an amendment process for things. This is also goes back to having city officials that will actually welcome that and actually let us know about this process, because I'm sure a lot of folks did not know that, one, that folks could collect petitions to run for the charter, and also that the charter will be on the ballot. Also on the arts and culture, we have a lot of folks in the city, both young and old, who that arts and culture make up their lives. So this is something that we should have in the city, and something that we should do to make sure that we're leading whole lives and have a good quality of life as well.
Thank you very much. And the last opportunity for you to speak is for 1 minute to give your final and closing comments, and then I'll have a few comments afterwards, and we will end this evening. So whoever would like to start? We'll start with Joanna and go down the line.
All right. Well, I would just like to thank you again for having this candidate. This is a very beautiful candidate forum. I'm so happy. I'm a big supporter of Detroit People platform. And all I ever wanted to do is live in a city where we have fair, respectable government that respect the interests of the residents of the city of Detroit. And so that's what I'm going to be fighting for. Joanna Underwood is a fighter for the people, an advocate for the best interests and well-being of the people, to make sure every citizen of the city of Detroit is being respected and also being appreciative. And so we can have a fruitful city where we all prospering, and not just downtown, core town, and midtown. I'm so sick of it. So I want you to please select the right people for Detroit Charter. Our life is on the line here. We in the last, y'all know, we in the last stages of gentrification in the city of Detroit. Underwood is for the underserved. Please vote for Joanna Underwood.
All right, so before I came to this forum, and apologies for being late, I was at a meeting with Good Jobs Now on 6 Mile. And right before that meeting, there was a young group of kids, after-school program being mentored, and the teacher was talking about Prop 1. She was talking about the various elections. Most of them couldn't vote, but she was reinforcing to them that they still should be engaged. For me, although we all say that we shouldn't reopen the charter, this is our moment. This is our moment to engage Detroiters, to engage in a process where we let the public know what the charter is, why it's important, what's in it. We use various mechanisms to get the word out, not just having people come to the KMAC building, but throughout the community. So this is a time for us to educate Detroiters about what the charter is. And like Joanna said, this is life or death. This is a time where Detroit is evolving extremely fast, and this is our time really to think critically about how we want to envision our Detroit for the future. So again, my name is Cantrell, and I hope to have your vote.
Thank you. Denzel.
Again, my name is Denzel McCampbell. Look, we're at a crossroads, and Joanna mentioned it. This is our way that we can stop this corporatizing, this profiteering off of Detroit, and actually make sure that our city is working on behalf of folks and accountable to people. I've been in close work with the Detroit Future Platform. I know a lot of folks in the room. I was there debating Scott Benson on the CBO when he was spreading lies about it. So I'm really dedicated to working on behalf of people, and I really would ask for your support on November 6th and for your support for the People's Slate as well for Charter Commission. So thank you.
Thank you. Nicole.
Again, my name is Nicole Small. Let me just say this about myself. While I've worked in a professional capacity, and I still do, one thing that I can say about myself, I am not new to fighting for the people. A lot of things that I have done have just been for the best interest of the people. While other people, they say that they work in nonprofit sector, they say that they have worked on issues, but it's all for their own benefit. Like I said, I have stood with people for water shutoffs. I have delivered water. I have stood against the predatory tax foreclosure. My family had their business taken away from them. So you know I don't support gentrification. I was the one that gathered that group that you may have seen when Dan Gilbert put out that piece saying that this is what Detroit looks like, and it wasn't anybody looking like the people in this room. I was the one who gathered the people to send a message back in the media. No, this is what Detroit looks like. This is what Detroit has been, and this is what Detroit will continue to be as long as we stick together. So this is more than just about an elected position for me, because I don't care about that. It's about preserving the power of the people.
Karissa.
So my name is Carissa Holmes, and what I would most like to bring to this process is a process of inclusivity, a process of engaging people across the city of Detroit, making a process that is easy for people to participate in. Like Chase said, so many people don't even understand what the charter is, what's in it, what it does. This is our opportunity to make sure that all Detroiters have an opportunity to learn about the foundational document of their city. I want to use 2018 technology to make sure that people can be involved, not just have meetings at night, but also think about reaching people through text message, through email, through surveys, through other type of online forums, so we can actually get the feedback that we need to revise the charter or not revise the charter in the ways that it needs to be done.
Thank you. Tracy.
Tracy Peters, this is what I want you to remember about me. I always thought this was a position I could run for, but this is the time I have to run. Just as Denzel and Joanna said, this is the time for pushback. I may push back in a different way, but this is exactly why I became an attorney after being a teacher. I don't sit on panels, I don't dress up, I'm out there doing the work. I want to do the work here because I have the skill set. I love my city, I love growing up here. And finally, one of your positions, I really believe that a Detroit majority black city matters. Thank you.
Cindy.
The Home Rule Act said that you either have it every 16 years or whatever the charter says. And that's why we have this election now, because the 2012 charter in 9-204 or something said that we're supposed to have an election. I don't know who put it on the governor's election, and it didn't make too much sense, but, so we can, at the end of this whole thing, after they work for a couple of years or whatever, then we can vote no if we don't like it. Or we could also have them put into the charter that we're gonna open it right back up in such and such year, and in the meantime have monthly meetings trying to figure out what our problems are right now and what could we do if we had a stronger charter, what would you put in it? Maybe something like that would be a good approach, but I do think that it's not, and they can put options on there for you to vote on, because they did it in 1974.
Thank you very much, Cindy.
1997 charter.
Thank you very much, Cindy.
Two choices on some of the stuff. So they could let you choose every
Cindy,
section.
thank you
Every
very much.
section.
Thank you.
Instead of them voting on.
Audience, we'd like to thank you for coming out. Let's give the candidates a hand for coming out.